What is up, ladies and gents? Zoop here, and so is patch 0.8.5. This patch has brought us a lot of things, including the Rogue Wave event. However, of all the changes, one has already had a huge effect, and that's the changes to anti-aircraft and aircraft carriers. Yep, everyone's least favorite topic, carriers. While I could talk about continuous damage per second and all the minutiae of how AA works, I'll simplify the old way and the new way AA works. This is important for both CV players and all other players to know. Prior to 8.5, AA was more random and more evenly distributed across an entire squadron. While in some ways this was more realistic, it also gave squadrons a bit of an advantage because it was less likely for a ship to shoot down a lot of planes. In fact, in some circumstances, it made it hard to shoot down any planes at all. A lot of the pain and anguish felt by non-CV players was due to this mechanic and a feeling of helplessness when attacked by squadrons. After patch 8.5, this has changed. Instead of random damage, AA damage is now focused on the last plane in a squadron. Unless of course the squadron flies through a flak burst in which many are damaged, continuous AA will now focus on one plane until that plane is destroyed, and then it will move on to the next. That's the new AA in a nutshell. Chances are after this patch you'll notice yourself shooting down more planes than you're used to, and this is why. Planes can no longer attack with impunity. In many ways this is exactly what was needed. Battleships and cruisers, aside from Minotaur and other heavy AA ships, now have slightly better means for defense. It's important to note this won't completely stop an attack. If a CV's gunning for you, they'll make a drop on you. However, with the changes, it's possible one pass is all they'll get. With each patch, it seems like we get closer and closer to where we need to be with carriers. It's really unfortunate we weren't closer when carriers were released. I feel that if they were where they are now at the time of release, players would have been much more accepting of the rework. I personally have indeed noticed a difference playing CVs post 8.5. The number of rounds where I've done over 150,000 damage has decreased, and I have a lot more low damage rounds. In fact, I've had quite a few very low damage rounds at about 60,000. Of course, a lot of this was due to priorities in the round, and despite the low damage, I still finished near the top. This highlights an issue that still exists with carriers, and that's how CVs affect destroyers. This is also why I've been on a good win streak with carriers post 8.5. Starting off focusing only destroyers, you can still rack up a lot of XP while affecting the flow of the battle. Really, in rounds with 3 or more destroyers and a CV, the team that knocks out the DDs first has a higher chance of winning. CVs are still brutal against destroyers, and attack planes still cause a ton of damage, easily delivered. Even if you don't sink destroyers, keeping them from capping is a large key to success. You can do 60,000 damage in a CV, focusing primarily destroyers, and still rack up the most XP or close to it and win the game in the process. So in my opinion, while we're closer to where we need to be in regards to AA, we still have a ways to go with CV-DD interaction, and I really hope this is looked at soon. As for the carriers themselves, the AA changes have had a pretty large effect. So let's look at how they've affected each nation, and I'll give my recommendation on which CV to play if you're struggling. For this, I'm going to look exclusively at the tier 10 ships and give my opinions based on those, mainly because I just haven't had time to test the other tiers. Hakuryu, in my opinion, was affected by 8.5 the most. Hakuryu's strength, in my opinion, was her ability to weaken ships with torpedoes and then use her dive bombers as a way to finish ships off. The torpedoes on her are still effective, but while pre-8.5 you could pull off several drops using the 2-plane drop formation, now that planes are shot down more easily, you might see a 25% or more decrease on the drops you can pull off with one squadron. What's worse is the heal on torpedo bombers, since one plane is focused at a time. You have to be quick to heal that one plane, and really, the heal's kind of useless now. I guess if you fly into flak and have several planes damaged, you can use it, but most really good players are going to be able to avoid flak. Dive bombers have taken a hit as well because you're spending a lot more time over your target. While before the patch you could make multiple drops on a lone Des Moines, and a good Hakuryu captain could citadel them to oblivion, again you'll find you're unable to make more passes due to your planes getting shot down more easily. While prior to the patch it seemed there was an endless amount of planes, you have to be wiser with their usage, or you will find yourself struggling late game with a plane deficiency. Midway has the same basic issues that the Hakuryu has. It's a little worse though for Midway because while Hakuryu's torpedoes are actually pretty good, Midway's are weak with an abysmal flood chance. The HE bombers on the Midway can still wreak havoc, but again, you'll lose more planes if you don't plan your targets properly. Both the Hakuryu and the Midway are still really good in the hands of a good CV player, but out of the two, I feel Midway has aged the worst since the rework. Of the two, the Midway is in my opinion the weaker carrier, and while I played it almost exclusively at first, I much prefer Hakuryu's. And this leads us to Audacious. And I will start by saying that if you're struggling post 8.5, Audacious is likely your best bet at tier 10. First, the torpedoes have always in my opinion been fairly easy to use on Audacious. You get a pinpoint drop pattern, 3 torps, and you can drop close to your target. While the torpedo bombers are pretty good, you'll still lose them if you're not careful. It's the bombers which are, in my opinion, what sets Audacious apart from the other two carriers. Your bombers spend much less time over their target since they don't have to dive. In addition to that, you can use your speed boost entirely over a target, minimizing your risk. Not only that, your bombs have a very high fire percentage chance. Midways do too, but again, you're going to lose more Midway planes because you actually got to dive and you spend a lot of time over those targets. It also helps that Audacious has tanky planes as well. Honestly, of the three, I feel that Audacious barely took a hit compared to Hakuryu and the Midway. That's just my perception from playing though. So if you're struggling with your Midway or Hakuryu, switch it up and use Audacious. It's a lot more forgiving. Of course, you still have to choose your targets wisely. Overall, I feel the AA changes are a step in the right direction. We've had this swinging pendulum where CVs will have changes that swing from too strong to too weak. It seems that the pendulum is finally slowing down to the point where we're dialing it in and CVs are close to where they need to be. This obviously won't satisfy the most diehard of CV haters out there, but it will provide some welcome relief to players that have felt hopelessness when a CV targets them, so long as you're not in a destroyer. That piece still needs a lot of work. If I want to sink a destroyer or make their life miserable, I can still very easily do that, regardless of which CV I decide to play. Now, I want to know your feelings on 0.8.5. If you play CVs, do you think this went too far in the wrong direction? If you play any other ship, do you feel you can shoot planes down more easily or have better defenses against CVs? Let me know in the comments. I'll continue to monitor things and we'll see if we get another hotfix in the near future as they continue to tweak carriers. Anyhow guys, thanks for watching. Interested to see your thoughts. Zoup out.